You know, I could tell the mood of people. Just look out there and see them. And I wait for a smile or two or three. And then I say, oh, now we're ready. I want to say to Russ and Candy, I'm so glad you're back. And we missed you. We missed you. Terrible, just terrible. I missed you. Sylvester missed you. We all missed you. And it's good you're back. Well, today, listen to Mama. I watched a movie last night. Maybe you've seen it. It's a current movie called Air. It's all about Michael Jordan. And if it wasn't for his mother, who knows what would have happened to him in his formative years, transferring from college basketball to professional basketball. And everybody came a-courting because they knew that Michael Jordan was a prospect. Very, very important one. Had a lot of potential. They offered him a lot of things, but they didn't offer him what she thought they might offer. Only Nike responded. So it's all about the phrase Air Jordan. I'm sure you've heard of those sneakers. Well, she said, okay, I'll go with Nike, and this much money, and these are the terms. In addition to that, we want a percentage of every sneaker sold with Michael's name on it. Well, let me tell you, they said, we don't do business like that. Well, you may have to start do business like that now because that's what we require. And then at the end of the movie, it said that because of his mother's insistence, Michael Jordan has so far received over $4 billion. And every year he gets $400 million from the sale of Air Jordan sneakers. Now, needless to say, I would love to have had a mother like that. I mean, it was just last night that we were watching it, and I didn't think I would get so much out of it. Anyway, today I greet you on this Mother's Day. I've been thinking about my own mother, and I wrote about her in the Dome Light. Began to think about some of the things that my mother said, offering me advice, on a world range of things. The old phrase, remember you all had mothers. And there's something about motherhood that I think we are in tune with today. At least I hope that we would be. Her advice was meant to help me to improve, help me to secure my safety, and help me to be happier. And I came up with a few things that I'm sure my mother never ever said to me as her son. And I thought I might share with you about some of the things that my mother never said. Would you like to hear a few examples of some of the things my mother never said to me? Never said these things. First one, how on earth can you see the TV sitting that far back? How about this one? Yeah, I used to skip school a lot too. You can always make up the work you missed next week. Why don't you get a classmate to do your homework for you? Never said that to me. Just leave all the lights on. It makes the house look more cheery. Let me smell that shirt. Yeah, it's good for another week. Go ahead. You can keep that stray dog, son. I'll be glad to walk and feed him every day. Well, if Timmy's mom says it's okay, that's good enough for me. Huh? Never said these things to me, right? The curfew is just a general time to shoot for. It's not like I'm running a prison around here. Don't bother wearing a jacket. The wind chill is bound to improve. I don't have a tissue with me. Just use your sleeve. Never said it. Never said it. And taking too many baths is a waste of water. Besides, you took one last week. Well, I don't know if your mother never said those things to you, but they certainly are things my mother never said to me. Somebody has to make sure we survive our childhood, and usually that falls to mom. I can't imagine a better lesson on Mother's Day that begins with, honor thy father and mother. Now, I can't say I'm sure of everything. In fact, I am pretty sure that I can say that I'm unsure of most things. But there's something to be said for reading the guidance in places like the Bible that offers some kind of lesson, ethical standard, if you will. Not to debate whether every word is from deity on high, but whether we can learn something from it as we live our lives. Honor thy father and mother. It's not bad when you consider the many things we don't honor. Mothers are usually the peacemakers in most families. Rebellious children are called the truth sayers. And fathers are generally the agitators. Now, every family is different, so people might wear different hats to that perspective. But the triangle of how any family functions often involves those three aspects. Now, there are variations, making every family distinctively different from other families, but by and large, the rule applies. Mothers are the glue that help families to function. I just mentioned Nike sneakers, didn't I? Do you know what their theme is? And I know you do because you've seen it as many times as I have. Go ahead. Just do it, right? Well, one young man said, you stole that from my mother. But you forgot the last part of that. What was the last part of that? He said, because I said so. Now, I do. Now, how many times did I do that with my... Do you know that my mother and I'm deviating here. My mother and I used to fight every Saturday. I would clean too much for her. She said, I'm tired of you cleaning the house. Can you imagine? I said, but it has to be done. No, it does not have to be done. What has to be done is you walk it out and go play with your friends. I would always clean the house, and she would always take it personally. I know how to clean the house. Yeah, but it needs to be clean. That was my thing, cleaning the house. Now, I don't know what arguments you ever had with your mother, but I thought it was interesting because that was one of the ones that she and I had. I doubt many people could doubt the incredibly strong bond between a mother and her child or her children. There is an undeniable link of love and obedience. We can threaten a child into obedience. We can punish active and willful defiance. But the only way that our children internalize the values we want them to have is if they are connected to us by a bond of love that cannot be broken. What is obedience anyway? The word appears negative to me. Obedience. Sounds pretty obvious, but it's lost value these days. We have become a permissive society. We are in the era of do your own thing. The lines between right and wrong have become blurred. We make our own morality as we go along. And people who say they believe in law and order are doing the right thing have increasing difficulty applying those standards to their daily lives. I was reading the list of, they said, which sports has these most criminal activities? Bounced checks, been in jail, have done some pretty heinous other things. And then at the bottom it said it's no sports team. It's our U.S. House of Representatives and our Senate in Washington. They have committed heinous crimes. Now, we make our own morality. And people who say they believe that, well, some young people have difficulty in that word, obedience, because we have replaced that with question authority. Maybe you remember when your mother nagged you. to do the right thing. I think the greatest thing was when my mother said to me, I know that you can do better than that. You are better than that. Those are piercing words. It's difficult for parents, father, mother, to watch their children grow and be able to make their own mistakes. We have a tendency as parents to intervene. Sometimes that's a good thing, and at other times it's a pretty bad thing. Standing aside to let your child make a mistake that you know they're going to make is a tough part of parenting in its very sense of it all by itself. Obedience as a word can never be without the word love. Gradually in time, you eventually see your mother scolding you, nagging you, disciplining you, and helping to mold you. Something that you grow to really appreciate. Maybe not at the time, but certainly in time. Now, why would we follow the advice of our parents when, as teenagers, we thought every word out of our mouths was the highest form of intellectual thought that there could be, and nobody dare question what we believed or what we thought? Well, maybe we came to realize something, at least I did, that our parents have lived longer than us, and they've been through more than we've been through. And just because of that, maybe their experience is worth listening to. It's not rocket science. Now, as I butter up everybody's mother, including my own, I don't mean to leave out sometimes they could be guilty of some things. Neglect, overreach. Yes, mothers and fathers do make mistakes. They're human. We don't like to see our parents making mistakes. But they should be willing to admit that they do make mistakes. And they should be willing to apologize to their children if they have overreached or done something that they shouldn't have. Many of us are offended by the notion of obedience. We want to be the captain of our ship. But listening to mama is an important trait to a successful life. And while we have this important advocate on our behalf, helping us to face the world, it doesn't mean that our parents don't have expectations of us. There's some things that mama cannot teach. Responsible behavior with adult thinking is something we have to grow into. And hopefully we do and we did. But we can learn by example, and you heard the phrase, don't do what I do, do what I say. Well, that slogan is tested more now than ever. We're living in an era where people are not being held accountable for their conduct. And I'm troubled by that. For some people they are, but for others, seeming they're not. Well, that slogan is a test. Young people today are much smarter than they used to be. Back in the day when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of things that created that intelligence or helped to facilitate it. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. There was no of a lot of things. The most modern thing that we ever had was the IBM typewriters. Remember that with the little ball? That was it. That was it. Well, people today are questioning authority, which I think is good. But questioning authority can be productive only if it improves whatever the subject matter may be at the time. Now, a while ago, I heard a parable that you might be able to relate to. It illustrates what I'm trying to say. Imagine a company whose president decides to travel abroad. The president of the company says, I'm going to be away for a while, He said, but I'm going to keep writing to you and telling you what needs to be done. You're my trusted employees. I want you to pay close attention to the business. You manage things while I'm away, and I'll write to you regularly. And when I do, I'll let you know what you should do until I return. And everyone agrees. The president leaves for a couple years. He writes often with the instructions of how his business should be conducted. And finally, he returns. And when he approaches the front door of the company, he realizes something. The flower beds are full of weeds. And the windows across the front of the building are broken. And the receptionist at the front desk is sound asleep. And when the president reviews the company's bottom line, things are worse. The business had suffered huge losses. What in the world is going on here? He asks these negligent employees. What do you mean, they ask. Well, look at this place. Didn't you get any of my letters? Letters. Oh, yeah, sure, we got every one of them. One employee replies, as a matter of fact, we had something called letter studies. When you sent those letters, every Friday night since you left, we studied your letters. Yep. And we have even divided all the personnel in small groups, and we discussed many of the things that you wrote. Some of those things were really interesting, and you'll be pleased to know that a few of us have actually committed to memory some of your sentences and your paragraphs, and a couple people even memorized the whole letter. Yep, there sure was great stuff in those letters. And the frustrated president says, okay, you got my letters. You studied them, you meditated on them, you discussed them, you memorized them. But what did you do about them? Do? We didn't do anything about them. Were we supposed to do something about them? Well, we are all a product of our heritage. People that have gone before us, that we are fortunate to know, to have been born in their family, have left values, they have left ethics, they have left morals to us. And now it's our responsibility to take some of that from our past, in our heritage, from our family, our ancestors, and our mother and father, and put into practice what was painstakingly taught to us. Now, that's very hard to do. How well do you think you lived up to those expectations? Did you feed the poor? Did you welcome the stranger? Did you forgive those who wronged you? And are you now talking to those people who insulted you? Are you a good neighbor? And do you contribute to the better good of your community as well as your faith community? Now, when I speak of obedience, I don't speak of adherence to the letter of the law. I'm speaking about love for your people who instilled in you values that allow you to follow the spirit of the law. There's two different things. And nor am I speaking how you should do this. Don't park your brains at the front door. We are not robots. But neither are we clueless children. Many years ago, I was in elementary school. And I remember we went on a field trip to Lincoln Center in New York City to watch the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Wow, that was such a great trip. And to keep us in line and be assured that we would be on our best behavior, I remember our teacher telling us we must remain with her at all times. And she said that many, many times, that we were to remain with her at all times. Well, we sat down and we were in the best behavior. we were gonna listen to the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in Lincoln Center. This was incredible. So after the house lights went down, our teacher quietly left her aisle seat and she made her way to the ladies' room, way downstairs where all the restrooms were. And as she placed her hand on the door handle, she heard a noise from behind her. And she turned around, and wouldn't you know it, her entire class, including me, were obeying her instructions to the letter. We had followed her all the way down to the restroom. We were right behind her, all of us, the entire group. She told us that we should never leave her side. Well, she did instruct us, didn't she? And we did. Unitarian Universalists are not children who live in blind obedience without exercising our brains. But neither are we obedient out of fear of divine retribution and or punishment. We honor our mothers and fathers because we love them, and we believe that what they taught us matters. Only when we grow and become adults do we realize the magnitude of that love and what really does matter. I don't think there's any greater love on earth than a mother's love for her child. I believe that is something that is a mystery even today to a lot of people. It's entirely appropriate, I think, on this day to recognize our mothers in special ways. We actually recall how we've been disciplined by our mothers. We were given rules to follow, even ones so bland as don't sit so close to the television, or be sure to put your jacket on, or be in by midnight. But you know how deep down in your heart, she was doing that out of love. You were at the very center of her world. She wanted you to be safe. She wanted you to be happy. She knew this is a dangerous world, and there are some things that might bring us a few moments of happiness, but in the long run, those few thrilling moments could spell ruin for us. So being firm, being overly protective perhaps, but not mean, and you know, moms are human too. They make mistakes just like everybody. But 99% of the time, they make those mistakes in love. They advocate for our well-being. So I'm very curious about what your stories are, what memories you have when you grew up, and what your mother and father had experienced with you. The love that is so strong it cannot be described into words. Well, in this month's Dome Light, I shared with you some of my mother's love for me. One thing about my mother that stood out, I didn't tell you about this in the article, was her enthusiasm for the American pastime, baseball. My mother was in love with Stan the Man Musial, who played his whole career for the St. Louis Cardinals. And she knew a lot about baseball, and I didn't know that. I learned that as I was growing up. And pretty much everybody heard the name Babe Ruth. Everybody, right? There isn't anybody here that doesn't know that name. Even if you don't know baseball, you certainly know that name. Well, Babe Ruth hit 714 career home runs in his career as a baseball player with the Yankees and with the Boston Bruins. Well, on April 8th, 1974, had my mother lived, it would have been her 43rd birthday. And coincidentally, on that date, Hank Aaron of the Atlanta Braves hit a home run surpassing Babe Ruth's record. It was really quite a thing to watch. And I kept thinking how poetic it is that this is happening on my mother's, what would have been her 43rd birthday. I can see she would have been front and center watching Hank Aaron on that big square Zenith TV that we had, trying to break Babe Ruth's home run record. And he did. Breaking Babe Ruth's record. Now, you must understand, this was a different time. We're talking about almost 50 years ago. And an African-American player was about to topple the great Babe Ruth. And a lot of people in the country didn't like it and didn't want it and was hoping that he would fail. Well, he got a lot of mail that year, more than 1 million letters in all, far more than any other person in the country. Most were fan letters, but about 100,000 of them were letters of hate containing death threats. Everybody in the stadium, in that Atlanta stadium, was on the edge of their seats when Al Downing, pitcher for the Dodgers, hurled the ball toward the plate. Hank Aaron swung and connected. The crack of the bat echoed through the stands. The ball was gone. Home run number 715. Babe Ruth's record was shattered. The ballpark went crazy. Standing ovation. This was baseball history. And as Aaron rounded second base, a couple of teenagers had jumped over the fence and ran onto the field, and they were chasing Hank Aaron. For a moment, nobody knew what they had in mind, but then it became clear they were just celebrating like everybody else and cheering Hank Aaron on. Hank Aaron crossed the plate, the dugout emptied, the Braves team came out to cheer him. The game was stopped. Cheering and whooping, that's all that was left. And in the midst of all those ball players around Hank Aaron, out of nowhere appeared a short, little 68-year-old black woman. And she latched onto Hank Aaron, and she jumped on his back, piggyback style, and she kept putting her hands on his head. And that's on film. I'm not saying something that's an exaggeration. And he carried her, and looked around and said, "Mom, what are you doing here?" Right? And she said, "Henry," talking to the new home run king, "if they're going to get you," thinking of those death threats, "they got to get me first." And how could that be anything? How could there be anything other than the love of a mother could have for her child? If they're going to get you, they're going to have to get me first. Well, I saw all that firsthand in real time. And I just thought of my mother. It was on her birthday that occurred. You see, the miracle of love is not that I love my mother. The miracle of love is that my mother loved me. Thank you.